Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of The Chocolate Life Live. My name is Clay Gordon, and I am your host today, as I am every one of these Chocolate Life live streams. I want to welcome you, everybody who's joining me today, no matter where you might be checking in from, whether it's YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook. And if you can go into the comments and shout out where in the world you are connecting in from today, that would be really great as well. I'll get your comment up on the screen and just to let everybody know where you're watching. And with that, I want to get started with today's topic. Actually, that's not quite true. What I want to do is I want to celebrate the fact that yesterday was National Strawberry Day here in the United States, and I'm going to do that. I have a new chocolate bar from Askinosie Chocolate, and it is a white chocolate covered strawberry bar. They're using cocoa butter that they press in-house from the Philippines and from Tanzania. Other ingredients are going to include cane sugar, strawberries, turbinado sugar, beet sugar, black pepper. So an interesting bar. It's a limited edition for this kind of year, and it has a fabulous color, as you can see. You know what? Let me turn on a light, and so I can enhance the color of it here. Sean, sent me these in the last couple of weeks, and I love the way the mold is put together, and it has a very, very light, delicate strawberry aroma. It's really there. Probably using freeze-dried strawberry powder in the. There's a sort of a real hint of strawberry acidity, and I want to say that's the primary flavor component. There's a sort of citric component, which that strawberry acidity, that citric component, which provides a little, salivation. So my mouth just fills with the chocolate. It's white chocolate, so it has very, very smooth texture. And is really quite a lovely tasting experience. So if you like strawberries, and unfortunately yesterday was National Strawberry Day, but go out and give it a try. It's really a lovely bar. And with that, I want to give a shout out to Lo Bibby, who's connecting from Charlotte, North Carolina. Lo, how are you today? Glad to have you join us today. And with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump in to the topic for today, which is alternative ingredients. Now, I've covered alternative sweeteners, and I've talked with some people about alternative forms of cocoa over the course of the last year. I'm in the midst of writing an article on alternative ingredients for International Confectionery Magazine, and I've got some things that I want to talk through, and get some comments from people about what they think about the whole idea of alternative ingredients. And specifically, I'm going to be looking at sort of three areas of innovation today, or three areas of development. One of which is in cocoa and chocolate analogues, right? Another one is going to be around sugar replacements, and a third one is going to be around milks. So plant-based alternative milks, what are called PBAMs. There's been some FDA guidance around labeling of alternative milks, and just sharing some of what it is that I've learned over the last little while about these things. So I want to jump in right away and talk about the first thing I want to talk about today is a company called Win-Win. They're in the UK. And the founder is a guy by the name of Johnny Drain. I have written about two other companies for International Confectionery Magazine. And at this point, what I probably want to do is jump back really quickly. This is the post on the Chocolate Life for today's live stream. I create a post for every live stream here on the Chocolate Life and the Chocolate Wire. And so you can scroll down, and what you will do is you will find links, all right, to resources. So this link is to the homepage of International Confectionery Magazine. This link is to the archive of all of my articles that have been published on International Confectionery. And then there are links to Win-Win Food Labs. We're going to talk about another UK-based company called Supplant. We've got this draft labeling by the FDA on milk. And then we're also going to be talking about this company, Perfect Day, and what they're doing in milk. And then a third company who's doing something in Finland, who's doing some interesting things in milk. And we'll get to more afterwards if there's time. But I want to jump in. So there has been a lot of interest. Let me switch the views here. There's been a lot of interest in the last couple of years, at least on the scientific and the technical and on the lab side of things, about creating analogs to cacao or analogs to chocolate. So can we create something that tastes like chocolate, but actually isn't made from cocoa beans? Now, in general, we have a couple of approaches, one of which is to use what's called precision fermentation. So we might take some ingredient, maybe a grain, and what we're going to do is we're going to, in the lab, create a microorganism, a yeast, bacteria, some sort of microorganism. And what that is going to do is it's going to convert the chemicals in the feedstock, whatever that feedstock might be, and it's going to transform that into something that tastes like and resembles ground up cacao. Now, when you use fermentation, one of the things you can do is you can also have an organism that is capable of producing fats, lipids. And so you could, in fact, precision ferment a one-to-one replacement for cocoa butter, right? In addition to a replacement for the non-fat cocoa solids. What Win-Win is doing is a little bit different. It's using barley as one of its feedstocks, and it's using some technique. I'm not exactly certain the details of the technique it's using to convert that. And then it's using carob as part of the flavor component. Now, depending upon the requirements of the customer, they might use cocoa butter or they might use another fat to round out the ingredients list. So they're not taking 100% fermentation to create all of the components that we might find in a cocoa butter or in a chocolate, but they are in fact using the technology to find a way to upcycle agricultural materials. So, for example, a spent waste, brand new material, and be able to reuse it rather than making it a part of the waste stream. So that's interesting in and of itself. I think that one of the challenges or one of the reactions that most people have to the idea of creating a cocoa analog or a replacement for chocolate is the notion of, isn't this going to hurt the poor cacao farmer, right? So, and I think that what people don't understand is just how big the cocoa industry and the chocolate industry are. I mean, we harvested last year about 5 million metric tons of cocoa beans and used it to create, products with a value of over $200 billion. When we think of all forms of confectionery, in which chocolate is used. And if what happens is that a small part of an industry, so for example, I create a product and what I'm going to use is I'm going to create a product which is like a compound chocolate in which I'm going to be using relatively small amounts of it, for example, to improve a candy bar or something like that. We're not talking about huge disruptions in the cocoa supply chain. I mean, it's, I don't want to sound apocalyptic about it, but there would have to be major disruptions associated with climate change, which took large amounts of cocoa producing areas and rendered them basically incapable of producing cocoa. And there wasn't time to move cocoa or no space to move cocoa to another region. And so we run into a situation where real chocolate might become extremely expensive and affordable only to people with a lot of money. And a chocolate replacement like this could be available to the rest of us, right? So it would replace what it is that we find around candy and candy bars. Now, there's another aspect of this which I find interesting. And so I'm interested in knowing what you think about. Number one is, do you think that cocoa farmers need to worry that these experiments are happening? Do we think that a cocoa or a chocolate-like product, sometimes call it chocolate adjacent product, is going to replace cocoa or chocolate? real cocoa and real chocolate anytime soon. So do you think that there will be an effect in that way? But one of the ways I like to think about this, and perhaps it will also help you think about this. And I just completely lost my train of thought. I will get there. But you know, in my head, I had something, and then I made the diversion to go and ask you questions about what you think about this. We need to go and take a look at the applications for this, right? And what are the sizes of the applications, and what are their potential markets for this? Now, one of the things that shocked me when I spoke with Johnny Drain, who is the founder of the company Win-Win Food Labs, that's doing this, is that he says that they can actually produce a product that is less expensive than conventional chocolate. Now, it can't be labeled chocolate because because it doesn't contain cocoa beans in it. There may be more than 5% of non-cocoa butter fats in it. In the EU and the US, no added fats. So it's not going to be coming to the market as chocolate per se. It will come as a chocolate-like substance. I have no idea what it's going to be labeled. I have tasted a version of gianduja made with this. It's hard to separate out, what the flavor of the chocolate was compared with what the flavor of the nuts was and how it interacted with each other. I would call the product that I tasted something that I would expect to find in a candy store as opposed to a gourmet chocolate store. I mean, just because of the balance of flavors, but for the kind of market this product may be going to, that would be very, very interesting. But here's a question. If somebody came to you and said, here is an alternative cocoa or an alternative chocolate, would you be interested in using it? What do you think the applications are? Where do you see this going? And Win-Win is using its particular approach to doing this. There's another company in Europe they used to be called Koa, QOA. They're now called Planet A, and they have a product which they call NOCO or NOCOA, all right, NOCOA. And this is the company that's using precision fermentation to develop their chocolate analog. I have sampled of it. There's an article about it on The Chocolate Life. And what I found to be true with that is because the only thing I tasted was bonbons, which had a very thin shell, that it was hard for me to tell what the chocolate contributed and what the center contributed. So I think the most important point when it came to thinking about Koa, now NOCO, Planet A, is that if I wasn't told that it wasn't chocolate, given the fact that there was only a small amount of this product in the shell, I don't necessarily know that I would have been able to tell the difference. I mean, even though I have a great deal of experience tasting chocolate, again, without being told that it wasn't really chocolate, I don't know that I would twig that it wasn't chocolate. I can play with, what I thought about, I can think about what I thought about the recipes and the balance of the recipes and things like that, but I wouldn't know what the actual chocolate part of it is. And so I need to go about doing it. This product from Win-Win is going to be available on supermarket shelves in the UK to begin with before the end of 2023. And so I'm hoping that they will send me versions of this product so I can or versions of what's going to be on the shelf so that I can share my experiences of it. And if anybody's watching, what do you think? Do you think it's interesting? Do you want to taste it? Do you want to know what it's like? Again, do you think it will ever be an accepted substitute? Do you think it will replace anything? Where do you see it being used in the world? For me, closing out this, one of the things, so I am at one level, the sort of science geek nerd in me really wants this to come to market and see what the market thinks. As somebody who has an interest in sort of basic scientific research, not just applied research, I am aware of the fact that we never know what is going to be discovered in the process of doing something like this. I mean, what ends up happening may be completely different from where we started and may solve a different problem right? So we may get some really, really interesting learning along the way, which is going to help solve a wide range of problems. We just don't know. Right? And so part of me is excited about this for that reason. On the other hand, part of me says, this whole finding things you can make in a factory to replace real foods, in which we're investing billions of dollars collectively globally in the hopes of finding a unicorn, some tech stock that's gonna blow through the roof, as we were doing with plant-based meat alternatives like Beyond Food or Beyond. Yeah, so Beyond. I'm not exactly certain how I feel about that. And should we take that money and should we be investing it on the farm? So for a larger societal good, would that money be better invested to improve farms and farming? I don't know the answer to that question. I sit down on both sides of that question. I don't know which I would go. But if you have an opinion where you think, where you lie, where your opinion lies on that matter, please share it with me. I would be interested in knowing. And if you have thoughts, I'm happy to respond to them. Put them in the comments, and I will get back to you on that. Right. So the next thing I want to do is talk about sugar replacements, sugar alternatives, and the world is really, really interested in finding a way to reduce the amount. So I say the world. Food manufacturing companies are very, very interested in finding a way to remove sugar from products. And those of you who may have been watching the news this morning may have seen this was a study which says a very popular sweetener called erythritol, which is currently on the generally recognized as safe list, may actually change health outcomes for cardiovascular events for people who are already at risk for major cardiovascular events. So if you have an underlying factor, for example, diabetes, which increases your risk for heart disease and strokes, consuming large amounts of erythritol may, in fact, make you more vulnerable to strokes and heart attacks. Now, this was a small study. There is no understanding about whether what we've seen here is causation or correlation. So that will be required by a much larger, that will be discovered in terms of a much larger follow-up study. But what it says is that the things we have in our arsenal, the alternative sweeteners we have in our arsenal are not the be all and end all. We need to continue to work for other solutions. And this company, Supplant, says that they have an alternative solution. So what they're doing is they're using precision fermentation, and they are taking things like rice husks and wheat husks and corn cobs and other feedstock, which would normally either just be tilled back into the field or hauled away, perhaps burnt for heat in order to dry something out, for example. So they're taking these waste products as a part of early stage agricultural processes, and they're converting them into, they have two things. Number one is a sugar replacement, and then also a flour replacement. Now I have samples of products made with the sugar replacement. So the first one is a pair of shortbreads, which are from the company Supplant. It's under their brand. These shortbreads were manufactured by the folks at Bouchon Bakery in Napa Valley. So Thomas Keller has been a consultant on this project, and they are they sent me these as a part of some writing that I'm doing. What's interesting about the Supplant product is that it is naturally contains only about 40% of the sugar or the sugar component. So if we think about how much sugar is in a gram, for example, of sucrose, of table sugar, that an equivalent amount, because this is a 1-to-1 replacement for conventional sugar, the exact amount, a 1-to-1 replacement, would only have about 40% of the calories, right? And it would only have about 18% of the glycemic load. So we have a product here, which is a 1-to-1 sugar replacement. Importantly, it caramelizes which is really, really interesting and really, really important for chocolate and confectionery. It caramelizes. And I can use it in not only in chocolate, but I can use it in bakery applications. And so the bakery application I have here is a shortbread. The ingredients, so I've eaten much of it. The ingredients are wheat flour, butter, and from a label perspective, this gets called sugars from fiber. So it contains oligosaccharides and cellulose. There is some sugar. There's bourbon vanilla from Madagascar and some salt. So what you want is, this is Bouchon Bakery. Number one, I would expect the basic recipe and the technique and skills of the bakers to be extremely good. The texture is phenomenal. The flavor is primarily butter, but for me, I don't know where the sugar is in this recipe. Is the sugar used for dusting on the outside? I don't know the answer to that question. Is the sugar actually in the recipe? So it's hard to know how the actual sugar component, the table sugar component, is playing with my perception of the flavor. But I think importantly, so when we say one-to-one replacement, we're also talking about sweetness, not just other aspects of it. So there's a second version, which has got chocolate chips in it. I don't know whose chocolate this is. It's a fairly standard chocolate recipe. It could be chocolate, which is made by the Keller Chocolate Company in Napa. But I think the most important thing that hits me with these is that if I walked into a place like Bouchon Bakery, and what they did is they served me this product, right? And they did not tell me that it was a low-calorie product, right? That there was a sugar replacement in it, I wouldn't know it, right? The important thing here for me for this product is that I can't tell, right, that there is a sugar replacement being used, which for me is the most important aspect of these alternative. I wouldn't know. So one of the reasons why I bring this up is if we go take a look at this erythritol news. Erythritol is a sugar alcohol, so it's derived from plants, synthesized in a laboratory. Nothing wrong with that. But erythritol as a sweetener has something called negative heat of solution. And what that means is you put it in your mouth and your mouth cools down, right? So you put it in your mouth, you have to expend a lot of energy in order to extract whatever is in the substance, and your mouth cools down. That's really good if you're making a gum, which you want to be minty fresh, or a mint, which you want to be minty fresh. But if you're making a chocolate bar, right, that brightness, right, that cooling effect is one of the factors that lets you know this is not made with real sugar. So what many people are doing is they might use some erythritol, some xylitol, which has the same negative heat of solution with it. They might use some stevia. They might use some monk fruit. What they're doing is they're balancing different sugars to get this flavor profile. But ultimately, you end up with this bright sweetness. And that's a problem for me because it's something that I can immediately go, all right, this is a low sugar or a product which has had a sugar replacement in it. I'm not a big fan. I find the whole aspect of these sugar replacements, which have a sugar which has a negative heat of solution in it, a real problem. Now, they're also making chocolate bars. Again, these are these are actually crafted by Chef Thomas Keller, right? That's what it says on the front label. They are crafted by Chef Keller. The founder of the French Laundry, per se, here in New York City, Bouchon Bakery. I'm guessing that Chef Keller is actually not in the factory handcrafting these. He almost certainly, well, not almost certainly, was involved in recipe development. right? But I can guarantee he's not actually in the kitchen. So this is a 70% cacao bar. I mean, I haven't tasted this yet. We have an origin of Venezuela. We have dark chocolate made with sugars from fiber. Now, I believe that one of the things about Supplant and the way it's made is that it is a nutritive carbohydrate sweetener. So it fits the definition of the FDA standards of identity for what kinds of sweeteners you can use in a bar of chocolate. So we don't need anything special in the way of label declarations. So we have an ingredient list on the back: chocolate liquor, absolutely; cocoa butter, absolutely; sugars from fiber, again, oligosaccharides and cellulose; coconut sugar; sunflower, lecithin. So they're still adding some sugar, and coconut sugar actually has a very, very specific flavor profile to it. So I'm kind of wondering what that looks like. So open up the package. Wow. It has a really, really interesting aroma. I mean, there is a strong chocolate note to it, but I think I'm smelling some of the coconut sugar. I'm not exactly certain. I don't know what the coconut sugar. Um, um, I did a review many years ago on the first Kellermanni bars that I ran across. I was not at all impressed with the actual quality of the bar making. So in this particular case, the bar is underfilled. What happens then is that their feet have developed as the chocolate, as it cools, crept up the side of the mold. So there are little shavings on the back of the bar and on the front of the bar. There's a lot of dust associated with the fact that the mold was underfilled. So that's not a good sign. Wow, snap is good. I'm looking at the cross section and the texture of the cross section. It looks good. The aroma. All right. So the beans are very heavily roasted. I mean, from a flavor profile characteristics, the beans are heavily roasted. You may not like that. You may like that. 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. There's a strong chocolatey component that starts with the heavy roast on it. And then there's this interesting acidity that comes through the middle of it. And then the end flavor is this heavy roast. But there's, again, I think that the thing that impresses me most about the bar, I mean, this is not to my taste. It's not necessarily something that I would purchase on a regular basis. And by the way, this product is no longer being manufactured by Keller in Napa Valley. It's being manufactured by a company in Indiana, an unnamed company in Indiana. But what strikes me immediately about this product is that, again, if you were to give it to me and not tell me anything about it, my first thought would not be that it's made with a sugar replacement, right? Which I think is, again, a good sign for this particular product. So that if what it is that you wanted to do is you wanted to make a low sugar chocolate, and you did not want to use an alternative sweetener, like, for example, allulose, or you did not want to use erythritol, or you did not want to come up with a custom blend of things, you could use this product to make a chocolate bar. And you may or may not want to add additional sweeteners to it. So it provides some flexibility to reduce sugar in some interesting kinds of ways, lower the glycemic load, if that's what you're interested in. So it's a very, very interesting product, which is why it sparked my curiosity. So in addition to the dark chocolate, we started out as a 70%. There's a milk chocolate, again, 45%. Bean origin is Venezuela. I'm wondering if it's the same beans as the dark chocolate. I'm hoping it is. So with the milk chocolate, one of the things you never know is how the milk itself is contributing. So it's at 45%. I don't know what the ratio of sugar to milk is in the recipe. It doesn't say. But I would say this was a more dominant milk forward product than a 45% would normally be. It is definitely less sweet than I would expect most milk chocolates around 45% to be. There's something going on in the middle of this, and it may be that acidity that I mentioned that was going on in the dark chocolate that's coming through and beating with the milk. And so there's a second or so in the middle of this where I'm not exactly certain what the flavor is what is. And then, it gets maybe a barnyardy might be a way to think about doing. It's not unpleasant. It just comes through. It's a complexity. And then it comes out the other end and it's very clean. There's nothing that says I'm using an alternative sugar in this. And so I think that's a big win. So this product is not available yet in the United States. They're in the process of negotiating for distribution into the United States. Sample versions of it are available. If you're interested, you could let me know. I could see about getting some samples for you if you're interested. And if you're looking at this, one of the things you may notice while you're watching this is that in addition to, making sugar, they're also manufacturing a flour replacement, a one-to-one flour replacement. And again, rather than doing something like upcycling spent grain from brewing, which needs to be dewatered, which is a very, very energy intensive process, they're actually taking the waste from harvesting and then processing it and generating a flour replacement. So you see an example: rice husks, barley husks, corn cobs are the examples of things that they're using for feedstock. Now, unfortunately, I don't know. I haven't asked, and I probably should. Oh no, this says wheat flour as an ingredient, so they're not actually using supplant flour in these baked goods. But this intrigues me. What they're doing is different from what almost all the other alternative sugars are doing. What they're doing here is they're taking an input and precision fermenting or processing and creating an output ingredient, right? Which is one-to-one replacement for sugar. A while ago, I talked about a one-to-one replacement for sugar, which is called Zusto. It's only available in the EU at the moment, not available in the US. But what the approach that the Zusto people are taking is more conventional, which is they're taking a range of existing ingredients. So inulin fiber, erythritol, other sugars, right? And they're blending them together. And the result is a product that is more like regular sugar in the sense that it will also caramelize. And if you're in the world of chocolate and you're in the world of baking and you're in the world of confectionery, having a sugar product that caramelizes, a sweetener that caramelizes, is really important because erythritol and xylitol, monk fruit and stevia, these are not products that caramelize. Right? So I am intrigued by this, and I'm hoping to be able to get samples of the sugar itself, get samples of the flour, and work with them and provide some additional responses to this. And when I do, what I will do is I will put them all up on this post on the Chocolate Life in Alternative Ingredients. And if there are any other resources that are mentioned, you can, if through my answering questions that you might have, what I will also do is I'll put them up here on this page. So we're about halfway through today at a look at alternative ingredients. What I'd like to remind people is you're watching The Chocolate Life Live. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm the host of The Chocolate Life Live. I'm the creator and the moderator of TheChocolateLife.com, who is today's sponsor for the post and the live stream. If you are watching, please go into the comments. Let me know where you're watching from. And if you have a question, throw it into the comments and I will try to get it answered for you today. Now, having gone there, what I want to do is I want to shift the focus from sugars and sweeteners into milk or alternative milks. And the first thing that I want to point out is that for a number of years, the dairy industry has been lobbying for the word milk, the use of the word milk, to be restricted to dairy products, to animal-based milks, right? So you wouldn't be able to call it animal milk or almond milk spelled MILK, right? Because, right, they wanted the FDA to say milk is animal derived, and these plant-based alternative milks can't actually be labeled milk. Now, this goes against a long history of how we think about food. So, for example, the standards of identity for bread in the United States say it must be made with wheat, right? But we know that if I go into a store and it says rye bread, or it says whole wheat bread, or it says sourdough bread, or some other spelt or some other kind of bread, we know what that means. We understand that, bread is this thing, and the ingredients a lot of different ingredients can be used in order to arrive at that bread. And wheat is one of them. And so we would say, in the absence of any other descriptor, we would assume that it's wheat. But if there's another descriptor, we would assume that it's something else. And I think one of the things I think the FDA is saying here in its draft guidance here is that it's going to say consumers are smart enough to know that if it says almond on the front, that it's non-dairy. Almond milk is non-dairy. And there's no reason to provide any special protection, consumer protection, based on lobbyists' fears of the chaos that might happen in the marketplace. So although, right, they say that the draft recommendations issued today should lead to providing consumers with clear labeling to give them the information they need to make informed nutrition and purchasing decision. So most of the labeling that's here is about how does the milk, whether it's soy milk or almond milk, right, how its nutrient composition, right, differs from animal protein milk, right? So this is something that's been a long time in coming. It is perhaps not as wide ranging as many people would have hoped, but if you're a chocolate maker and you're interested in using alternative milks, so a plant-based alternative milk, right, going in and taking a look at the FDA guidance about what you can say and what you can't say, so what the language on the label needs to be, how is it going to impact the way the nutrition, so how is it going to impact the way the nutrition facts panel is constructed, right? How these things need to be presented in an ingredients label. All these sorts of things are really important if you're a chocolate maker or a confectioner and you are interested in using, right, non-dairy milks. Right? So really, really important. There is a link to this. If you go to the post on the Chocolate Life Live, this is the post. You can just click on this post here, right, and you can get to the page about the labeling guidance. Right? So you don't have to worry about, right, reading what it is that's going on or finding out or trying to determine what the URL of the page that I'm going to. Right? So that's the first thing about alternative milks. The second thing is there's a new company out there, which is called Perfect Day. And Perfect Day is using precision fermentation, right? Using genetically modified microflora to take a feedstock, right? And to be able to generate nature identical milk protein, whey protein. So if you put this whey protein and you subject it to chemical analysis, it is essentially identical in all respects to what you would find if you expected to extract whey protein, right? There are some people who call it mushroom milk. I think that's a turnoff. I think that a very, very small percentage of the marketplace would respond positively to mushroom milk, because what they're saying is their first thought would be, like almond milk or soy milk, I'm making milk from mushrooms, right? And that sounds sort of icky. It doesn't talk to the fermentation process, right? And so I think that's a challenge, right? But what I wanted to do is say that that I was brought to this particular product was brought to my attention in the r/chocolate subreddit from a company, and there was a description, or not description, there was a discussion following the original post about this product and what it consisted of, right? What it meant. So the first thing is that while it is lactose free, right, it is not animal protein free, right? So you could have a lactose intolerance, and I think this would be okay for you to consume. But if you had a dairy allergy, so you were actually allergic to the proteins in the milk, then you wouldn't be able to consume this product. So very, very important from a labeling perspective to let people know what's going on here, right? The other one is people are going, well, because it is a nature identical animal protein, whey protein, that this is in fact not vegan, right? And this is a really interesting question because it gets to the heart of a couple of different questions about what it means to be vegan. So for example, there's a process definition around vegan and an ingredient definition around vegan, or at least that's the way I think about it. The process definition around vegan would say, okay, the sugar syrup expressed from the cane goes through charcoal. There might be animal remains in the charcoal. If there are animal remains in the charcoal, the syrup, because it touches the animal remains, is no longer vegan, right? Legit, right? Legit way to think about it. And so people are going, if the end result here is a nature identical animal protein, whey, then it can't be vegan, right? That sort of completely misunderstands the fact that we're using a microorganism, right? So it's a specific microorganism which has been tailored to be able to produce this specific result, right? And it is consuming a plant-based feedstock in order to be able to produce this result. So it's a precision fermentation. And by the way, if vegans said we're not going to allow fermentation, they can't drink wine, they can't drink beer, kombucha is off the list. All of these things rely, and more, for which there are vegan versions, rely on fermentation. And to say no fermentation means that a lot of things are no longer on the table to consume as part of a vegetarian diet, or a vegan diet. So the notion that we have some sort of organism which is fermenting a feedstock, as long as the feedstock is in fact plant-based, then whatever comes out the other side is in fact vegan, even though chemically even though chemically it resembles an animal-based protein. No animals were involved in any part of the manufacturing process. And so one of the questions people have is it vegan or is it not? Right? None of the constituent components, right, are not vegan, but could the end result not be vegan? Is an interesting question. So, if the feedstock is vegan and I'm fermenting it, and I realize that, there are other foods which are vegan, which can be fermented, is the end result vegan or not? And my personal opinion on that is that I would consider it to be vegan. Right? Because of all the inputs that are there. There are other people who believe differently about this because the end result is in fact chemically nature identical to an animal protein. It can't possibly be vegan. So so what are your thoughts? I mean, do you think based on my description, or if you're going to go and read these descriptions, and I'm going to put these links into the post on the Chocolate Life after this live stream, if they're not already there, so you can go take a look at it. What do you think? Is this vegan or not? The other thing that people are talking about, and by the way, there is a page here which talks specifically about the FAQ page, which talks about these things, and I'll put a link to this again in the Chocolate Life post for today. The other thing I think that people are concerned about is whether or not this is GMO. Right. So there's a very specific way What the Perfect Day people have taken a particular microorganism and they have genetically modified that microorganism to produce an output, right? Which is very, very specific. So they've genetically modified this to produce an output. But after the process is over, they claim, I don't know that you can get to 100%, maybe you can get to 99.999%, right? You'd have to do individual batch testing to make sure they were in fact clean, 100% clean. But the organism which produces this is genetically modified, but all those genetically modified organisms are filtered out of the finished product. And so the question is the finished product genetically modified? Again, I think that there's a definition of, is it a process definition? Ooh, it's touched genetically modified organisms, therefore it's tainted, and you can't remove the taint, right? An issue. I mean, if that was the case and you weren't a vegan and you were a cheese eater, there are a lot of things that we eat in the rest of our diet. Jeremy, who's watching today from Pittsburgh, has said he believes he's vegan. And I understand that definition. That's where I would fall down on that particular case. But Jeremy pointed out in a separate conversation that, for example, rennet, which is used in the cheese-making process, much of it is in fact made in using organisms which have been genetically modified to produce rennet. And we don't think of the rennet is GMO, non-GMO, and we're not really worried about it in the cheese. So again, a process definition, not entirely sure where that's going on. But again, Jeremy, I know where you stand on that particular way. You'd go non-GMO, and I would also fall on that side of the fence in terms of my understanding. But what I wanted to do is I'd want to see, there are tests that can be done for GMO proteins in products, and I'd want to see the tests. But the same thing is true of lecithin. When you have GMO-free soy lecithin, because so much of the soy in the world is genetically modified, when you have GMO-free soy lecithin, what they do is they just test batches to find out if there are any GM proteins left in the material. They don't specifically go out to make non-GMO lecithin because it would be much more expensive to manufacture that way. What they do is manufacture and then they test every batch. And if the batch test is GMO free, then it will be labeled as GMO free, not that they started out to make it as GMO free. So I think there might be a parallel in that for this particular product. I have a link which I did not post here and make available to me, and I do have it here, so let's go take a look at it. My final ingredient I'm going to take a look at today, alt ingredient, is from a Finnish company called Valio. They're a dairy company. I hope I'm pronouncing it properly, Valio. And what they have done is they have created what they call future milk chocolate. And what they've done to start off, from a recipe development perspective, is they've analyzed a lot of people. It doesn't say exactly how many people, over 1 million milk chocolate lovers. Okay, so they've analyzed the preferences of over 1 million milk chocolate lovers. And it's important, milk is important here, and because it's a milk company and all they care about is milk, right? And what they've done is they have pulled out the preferences of these million milk chocolate lovers and dumped them into 5 buckets, right? And the 5 buckets that they created were one called impulse, one called craving, one called delight, one called hunger, and one called relaxation. And what they've done is, you can see, this is an interesting, so they created a chocolate bar, right? Which actually, or I won't say it's a chocolate bar, it's a chocolate presentation, which consists of 5 different chocolates, and one each of these 5 different buckets that they've produced. And what I will do is, they sent me one. And it's this architectural landscape 3D thing, right? And each one of the layers represents one of the different chocolates. So the top layer, Impulse, is the white chocolate, and its ingredients are so the idea is that the type of chocolate represents one of the 5 flavor buckets, and the recipe is going to reflect what that flavor bucket is. And what's also important here is that Valio has created a milk which is less sweet than conventional milk. So what they claim is that if you use their milk product, which is called Better Sweet, what you can do is you can reduce the amount of sugar that you need in a chocolate by 30%. So what they've done is they say it's lactose free. They say that natural sugar reduction has been enabled by using the milk proteins to reduce the need for added sugar. Not exactly certain how they do it. They're not public about the particular techniques that are associated with it, but it's an interesting concept, I think, to introduce a particular new chocolate product. I mean, what we have is a chocolate product, and they've got this very, very architectural bar. I mean, Valio themselves didn't do it. They hired a Finnish company to actually do the production of the bar. But the white chocolate is lactose-free skimmed milk, #1 ingredient. It's in, from an allergen perspective, they want to make sure that they do talk about that. It does have animal proteins, so you do have a dairy. If you're a dairy protein allergic, you do need to be careful. Cocoa butter, sugar, clarified butter. All right, so this is one thing we'll find in all of the ingredients. So clarified butter, otherwise known as anhydrous milk fat, it can't be used as a flavoring ingredient, but what they're using it to change the texture of the product. So they want it to, #1, be softer, and #2, it retards crystallization. So form 5 doesn't turn into form 6 as quickly. So one way to think about it is that it's a preservative of sorts. So here we run into a first problem. So they stick it together, I'm guessing, with cocoa butter, and now my white chocolate is tainted with milk chocolate, the layer underneath it. So I have a little bit of impulse and craving put together. And so this would be interesting for me, is to take one layer and combine it with another layer to say, can I do impulse with relaxation? What would that taste like? But there are 5 different milk chocolates. Right? Okay. Coconut is an inclusion in this bar. So there's a texture here I did not expect, and I'm guessing it has to be the inclusion. The coconut doesn't come through as a flavor at the beginning. It comes through as a flavor at the end. And there's a little bit of chewiness at the end, which is not what I expected. What's also coming through here is that the chocolate is a little bit flat. It's not sweet at all for a white chocolate. Again, no percentages are indicated. It's Europe, so it has to be at least 33% cocoa butter. But what I want here is for white chocolate, I want a more flavorful cocoa butter. So for me, it falls flat. But it's interesting. It has this interesting texture, which I wasn't expecting. And that made it fairly interesting. So the second layer is called Craving. The ingredients are, again, skimmed milk powder, sugar, cocoa butter, cocoa mass, clarified butter, and soy lecithin. There is no coconut in this. So people who know me know that I am a dark milk chocolate fan. And what I need to do is I need to remember that I'm not the target market for this. And sometimes that's difficult to do. Remember that I'm not the target market for this. It doesn't have the sourness of Hershey milk chocolate. But at the same time, it's not as creamy as Cadbury dairy milk. There's something, you can see there's something in there, and I'm not certain what it is. Oh, I'm sorry. That's from another layer. The third layer is called Delight, and it is a lactose-free skimmed milk powder, cocoa butter, sugar, cocoa mass, clarified butter, and it has biscuit in it. So that little white piece you saw right in there, it's a little bit of biscuit inclusion. Now, the biscuit, palm oil or canola oil, glucose, skim milk powder, probably the same skim milk powder. It's got raising agents, tartaric acid, barley syrup, salt, molasses, malt extract, aroma, and soy lecithin. So what's interesting is that the chocolate itself here is appears to be darker, and it is much more interesting. The Delight is much more interesting to me, the chocolate on its own, than the Craving version. It's a better texture, a slightly better mouthfeel, and the flavor is a little bit richer. So interesting in that respect. The next layer is called Hunger. I have to break these. Sometimes some layers are easier to break than others. And the layers are different colors from each other, which I think is fun, right? This fourth layer is a straight milk chocolate. And so what we're doing is we're playing with the ratios of milk powder and sugar and cocoa mass here. This is what is called Hunger. And now we're getting into sort of a mass market milk chocolate that I think would sell in a very, very interesting way. It's a really, really interesting product. I don't know that this recipe will ever go into production. It'll ever be available. But what we're looking at is what the milk will do and what it contributes. Sugar is an ingredient. So we are using a lactose-free skimmed milk powder using the Better Sweet process to reduce the amount of sugar which is required in a recipe by 30%. So these are not no sugar products. They are low sugar products. They're not dairy-free products. They're lactose-free products, right? So depending upon the market that you want to approach, using this milk powder could be very interesting. So you're looking for something which is a lower sugar product, but not necessarily a vegan product, right? You're not worried about dairy allergies, but you're looking for a lower sugar product. And this would be a way to do it. I'm generally not a fan of milk chocolate made with skim milk powder. I prefer full cream powder over whole milk powder when it comes to making my milk chocolates, or a combination of whole milk and full cream powder. So the Felklin Creole, I think 38% milk chocolate, has both cream powder and whole milk powder. If you're into milk chocolate, it is a stunning chocolate to try. The last layer is called Relaxation. So it has skim milk, sugar, cocoa butter, cocoa mass, clarified butter, hazelnuts, almonds, right? So it has an inclusion. It's not the darkest of the five. The darkest of the five was the third layer, or Delight. So I have no idea how the chocolate recipe has changed. And again, one of the things about my job, one of the things I have to do is I have to be an equal opportunity chocolate lover. I don't judge things in advance. I taste them and I try to put them into two different camps. I have a technical evaluation: is this well made? And then a subjective evaluation is, do I like it? And what comes across to me here about this particular ingredient, and this is where I'm going to leave everyone today, is that this is an example of an ingredient that gives chocolate makers, I think, a little bit more creative freedom. If what it is that they want to do, if a goal of what they're doing is to be able to deliver lower sugar products, so not non-dairy products, not vegan products, not right allergen-free products. That's not what they're doing. But what they'd like to do is they'd like to release a lower sugar milk chocolate product. Then this is one way to do it, right? So this product seems to be an interesting way to go about doing. Now, it turns out that it's another way of doing this would be go to Perfect Day and use their milk product, but it's going to have different characteristics and it's going to meet a very, very different market. Now, Jeremy Burnish was in the room and he's going to be sending me, a sample of a chocolate bar that he's made using the Perfect Day milk. And I hope to get him online in the Chocolate Life Live in the upcoming future so that we can talk specifically about that part, the experience of using this alternative milk in making a product, considerations. Again, we can talk about some of the back and forth discussion about whether it's vegan, whether it's GMO, and all these other things, and dive into that. But the point of alternative ingredients, number one, is that what they do is they provide chocolate makers with a much wider range of opportunities in terms of how they're going to be able to change the recipes in order to be able to meet the specific requirements of their market, right? And to be able to deliver different products, even in the same line, which respond to different customer requirements, right? And I can see, for example, using a combination of these agreements. So using the supplant sugar replacement, right, as the sweetener. So I'm not using real sugar, or I'm not using as much real sugar, but I'm using the supplant as a sugar replacement in addition, to example, to a milk replacement in order to be able to, and is it this Valio low sugar, or is it the Perfect Day, mushroom milk chocolate? For want of a different term, and I haven't figured out what I want to call that yet. I don't know. Just that I'm not particularly a fan of mushroom milk because mushrooms aren't actually the feedstock for it in the way that almonds are feedstock for almond milk and soybeans are feedstock for soy milk. Hemp seeds are feedstock for hemp milk. But in any event, what I come away with from this research, compared with where we were 1 year ago, even just 1 year ago, is that I think that there are a lot more options than there were a year ago, and there are a lot more interesting options than there were a year ago. What we're finding, example, in these milks, these alternative milks, what we're finding in these alternative sugar, for example, is that we don't have to sacrifice flavor in order to be able to have a product which delivers the kind of enjoyment that we're looking for. And I would have said a year ago, if we're looking to do any kind of replacement sugar, for example, which had erythritol as any component, then it would be obvious that this was a keto chocolate or a chocolate aimed at a very, very specific niche, right? I am looking forward to, and please, let me know. I am looking forward to continued exploration of these ingredients. Hopefully, I will get samples of these things in. I'll be able to play with some of them. I will seek out people who are using these ingredients to get. I don't think I'm going to get Thomas Keller on the phone, but I would love to be able to get Thomas Keller on the phone. Partly because I want to ask him the hard question about the Mass Brothers, but I don't think I'll get Thomas Keller on the phone to talk about these things. But it's really, really quite interesting. And I'm hoping that as people think about the chocolate that they're making and the other chocolate related products, because, if you call yourself a bean to bar chocolate and all you make is bars, you're missing about 90% of the market. I mean, I think that what you need to do is you need to say, I am a chocolate maker. What can I make with chocolate? Bars is one of the things you can make, but perhaps the best way to think about a product is as a bark rather than deposit it into a bar. There are lots of reasons why barks might be a better way to think about something than bars. I mean, this real interesting geometrical mold configuration that's sitting here. I mean, it's a lovely idea. Perhaps this is a way of building, or perhaps not as intricate a mold, but doing something like this to create a pyramid, which provide an interesting tasting experience. I mean, I think there's a lot to learn just looking at this mold and thinking about it. It's like, if I think about how do I deposit this into bars, what am I overlooking? Right? And at that point, we've come to an end of the Chocolate Life Live for this week, looking at alternative ingredients in a different way. I have samples of them. I brought them to taste. I've been giving you my thoughts as I go through about what I think about them, about related topics, regulatory topics that people want to get to. So it's been interesting for me to think about this, to talk it through in my mind. As I say, I'm writing an article about this for International Confectionery about alternative ingredients. I'm going to go into depth more with the interviews that I had with the people from Supplant and the people from Win-Win as a part of that. So there'll be more information if you're interested. There's a link on TheChocolateLife.com in this post where if you want to, you can go and you can subscribe to International Confectionery Magazine. I think the newsletter is free. You can get the digital version, maybe for free. It's controlled circulation, so I think you can sign up for free. I don't know if you want the print publication. If you're in the UK, maybe you do. But interesting information there. Right? And I hope, as a part of this last hour, what I've done is I've been able to communicate the fact that I like doing this. I mean, I have a lot of fun. I mean, I love it when chocolate just shows up at my door, sometimes uninvited, and I'm unaware, and boom, all of a sudden the delivery guy says there's a box with chocolate in it, right? And I've tasted 5-7 different kinds of chocolate and 2 different kinds of shortbread here in the past hour. Shared my opinions with you live, right? And had a good time, as I always do, putting together these episodes of The Chocolate Life Live. Not certain what this coming Friday's episode is going to be, but I hope you can join me then. Until then, if you can, go to thechocolatelife.com, click on join, become a member. While you're here, if you're watching on YouTube or LinkedIn and Facebook, do a like, thumbs up, join the Chocolate Wire channel. If you're not already a member, that will help grow the community that shares these things. And oh, by the way, one last thing before I go, you can go to thechocolatelife.com. So here's the homepage right at the moment. All right, I apologize. Right now, we're having some problems with search. The search engine underlying was upgraded and it broke things. Not entirely sure why, but we're figuring that out. Hope to have it finished before the end of the week. Quick note, if you're in the Oregon area, the Oregon Chocolate Festival down in Ashland is this coming weekend. There's a link to purchase tickets up here, right? If you want to. So boom, including a link to the schedule. And I maintain an archive of every single live stream that I've produced on the Chocolate Life over the course of the last more than 1 year. And so you can go to this link on the Chocolate Life live calendar archive and see scheduled upcoming episodes, as well as every single past episode that has been produced. So hoping that you get a chance to do that. And because it's going to be easier to find past episodes on this page by doing a search within the page, just the browser search, than right now if you try to go and use search on the homepage, because search up here on the navigation, if you click on it, nothing happens, and for which I apologize. The nature of technology, anyway. And with that, I want to say thank you to everyone for being a part of the Chocolate Life Live for the last day in February. It's hard for me to imagine that we're already 2 months through. So we're 1/6 of the way through 2023. How did that happen? Right. But I will be back next week, as I am most Tuesdays and Fridays, with an episode of the Chocolate Life Live. And until then,